Hey guys, welcome to another week of an editing how-to video with me. This week we were talking about landscape and leading lines, and editing is a really important tool that goes alongside capturing a beautiful image like this. This to me has a really good moody weather element with the fog and clouds through the top. Obviously it's already gorgeous, with just the mountains and the trees and the layers by themselves, but that fog adds an element, that you can't control, that's a little bit different from your average mountainscape image. And so I just wanted to show you how I will edit this to make it stand out, to make the image pop a little. And some of the basic things I start with are always going to be the same. I really like to practice using the auto tone tool just to see what it's going to do. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. And then I'll try the auto white balance. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but it's worth a shot. Here I don't really love the tones quite as much, and I think these changes I do myself, so I'm going to undo that setting. I'm going to straighten out the crop here. I think I honestly, if I had had a different opportunity, I might have composed this a little differently. It seems a little narrow, but I was shooting on a 24-70, so this is actually a pretty wide shot for what it is. So you see here the whites in your tone slider panel here does beautiful at adjusting, but with this particular one, it makes it pop a little too harshly, like the quality isn't quite as great. So I'm going to pull this one back down, and if I want that feel, I'm going to go down to the tone curve panel, and I'm going to adjust the lights region on this slider. And you see there how that pop of lights comes up a little bit, and this is one of my favorite tools to use to take an image that looks kind of flat, like this one initially did. You can see here just a before. It looks pretty flat, and the fog doesn't help, obviously. That's a huge factor. And there's after. And this little slider tool, to me, that's just gold. I love the way that it looks. Sometimes you need to go back and save some highlights, and you're like, oh, the slider's already down in this highlights part. You can go back through here, and you have to be very careful with this option because it can, see how it makes it pretty gray, and you really lose the detail and the light. It doesn't look right, so be careful with this one. I'll pull up my blacks a little bit because the trees are a little darker than I'd like. Contrast is going to be important in landscape. It's going to make a lot of elements pop, but you'll also see that it can create a harshness that is not always super pleasant. Like here on the bottom row, the trees are really dark, cut off over here, which, like I said, is not my favorite, but if I had worked to get more of the trees, I would not have gotten as much of the mountain range here, and so I'll sacrifice some trees for a mountain view any day. So let's try the Dehaze tool. The Dehaze tool is fantastic for fog, and you can see that if this was like just a true fog element, this would be an awesome option. And then it also kind of makes it go away a little bit, which is also great. However, the best way to use the Dehaze tool is to go over here to this graduated filter and click on Dehaze here. And if I wanted more fog, this would be where and how I would use the Dehaze tool. You can see how it's like, boom, that looks like a lot more fog, doesn't it? Versus it's too much and I want to take some of that away. And you can kind of see on the top left, where there's some moisture kind of coming through, and so I think that would be too much, and I want some of that fog there. I think it's very interesting looking. So I'm going to leave the fog because I have plenty of views of these, photos and mountain views where there is no fog. So I think it adds a really interesting element to the photo. And this can be used in lots of instances where you have a light burst and you really want to either kind of clear up the kind of haze in any sense, whether it's light or fog or clouds. This is a great option. So I want just enough you can tell what it is, but still see the mountains, so I'm going to leave it right about there for now. We'll see how that looks. Let's come down here and check our light again. And man, I love this every time. That just looks so much better. We'll come down here in colors. Starting from scratch, it can be a little bit harder. If you have a preset you like, and then working through the color tones where you kind of have a jumping off point to play with the colors can be a little easier sometimes, I find. But if I'm just doing this from scratch, I always leave my hues at zeros. I want the colors to be what they are unless something looks off. For example, say I want this green to be genuinely green and not quite so yellow green. This would be an instance where I could adjust that panel, that slider, just enough. And see, it goes from like kind of a yellow green to more green. But then you also look at it affects the trees. So if I do it, it needs to be very subtle. And I could leave it right there. I could also change the yellows themselves to look more green. And then there you go. There's like no yellow color in there at all, or there's more, or it gets more warmer rather, but then it kind of looks dead. So another slider. Remember, subtlety is key here, just very little. And then you go back through and you make adjustments as you find them necessary. For every photo, I keep my highlights around this and on the right hand side of the slider toward the blues and pinks over here, and I only bring it up a little bit. I always keep my shadows a little warmer, and so this plays into consistency a lot too, where you do the same things in every photo and then you make more specific adjustments based on the photo that you're editing. So in this case, I don't need it to be quite so pink colored. It wasn't sunset. I don't want it to be quite so green and cool colored because it's already so cool. So I might pull the shadows up to be a little warmer and not so yellow or green. Kind of play with that a little bit. And still right in the middle, that balance looks pretty good. I'm actually going to go back up here and I actually want to desaturate the greens a tiny bit. And I like to pull back the yellows and greens on a landscape, even in the middle of the forest, simply because the camera captures so much of that color that it can really steal the show. Or even like when we had started this image, there's a lot of blue in there. This obviously looks really flat, so it's hard to tell. But as we auto-toned it up, it was so blue. But I really like that depth. If you look from the bottom of the screen where it starts kind of yellow, yellow-green, it goes up to blue, and then to like a kind of a gray, silvery white color. And I think that looks super, super interesting. I'm not going to mess with any of the sharpening or noise reduction. My lens correction's already done. No transform tools. Here we can look at like what a vignette does. And I'm very picky about vignettes for a good reason. Because as I've said many times before, there's not a natural darkness around all four corners of your frame. And if you see if I do that here on the top left and right, it makes the sky look darker on the corners. And that doesn't make sense unless I'm shooting through a pinhole camera or something, and I'm obviously not. So I'm not going to do that, but if I do want a vignette, we can try that option. You can see this circle here is because we pulled that dehaze tool down on this filter. Let's go to... We'll specify here, we'll go to burn highlights, and that means to take down some of the highlights, darken some of the highlights in these areas of the photo. So I would pull the highlights out of the corners where it wouldn't naturally be darker, because the light is going to be coming from the overcast part of the sky. So you can get away with a darker look in the corners there. Now, obviously, you could have just pulled it up straight from the middle, but I feel like it kind of lightens here where you see the grass, so I would leave it more like that. And here you can already see again, look at the difference between the colors in the image and the photo. And then at this point, I'm going to go back through again, and I'm just going to touch up a few things, bring up my exposure a little. I don't usually pull shadows up this much, but a lot of times in photos where the light and dark balance is not so great, you can, look at your histogram and kind of practice with where you have the darks, you have the lights, and you can see, there's a decent balance between the two. Nothing is completely overdone. But as you adjust that, you see how the histogram shifts up there. More darks on the left, more lights now on the right. But because it is so off on here, I'm going to pull them up a little bit, but I really like kind of that contrasted light versus dark, your eyes are kind of pulled down, and there's a lot of interest. Another option we can do to really bring out some more interest here is go to we'll try texture, and I would also bump up the clarity just a touch. And then we'll pull this down right over just the mountaintops right here and see if we can make those mountains pop through the fog without hindering the fog at all. So it kind of has that cool effect of fog meets detail in the mountains here. So you'll see texture. I would never, honestly, never reduce texture unless this was the area not in focus. So if this is in focus, I don't think you should ever reduce that texture. I mean, I'm sure there's specific reasons why you would, but in here I wouldn't. So I want to amp it up just a little. You can't see a huge difference. No, you can kind of see a good difference if you look toward the, here where the snow is on the peak. There's some good texture to pull up there. Super great. And then a little bit of clarity. You can even adjust the sharpness a little just to make sure those mountains are nice and crisp, again, even through the fog. And just to go back and look through that dehaze option here, we're at plus 19. And if you go down, you have more fog effect, less fog effect. Obviously it gets kind of unnatural looking, especially because of making the texture adjustments we just did. You know, so it's kind of fun to see and compare how that keeps moving as you go through. I actually kind of like it maybe a little bit more. I'd love to know what you guys think about that. Because it honestly, I mean, the fog was moving so quickly, the clouds were, you know, just coming and going, and within a few minutes, you know, when we had first gone up to this site, you couldn't even see the mountains at all. And then within a few minutes, you had a full view again. And then it was just kind of this back and forth with a little bit of misty cloud and fog coverage. And it was so striking and so pretty. So here we go. This is a simple before and after to kind of get an idea of making a landscape pop. You know, it's really about the colors, the contrast, the light, or in this case, the lack thereof, and how the fog was kind of playing in that element. And yeah, that's a really fun, easy one. I'd be careful with vibrance and saturation. You saw me kind of adjusting that a little because it's really easy to, you know, ooh, that looks good, but really it takes away from the quality because it doesn't really look natural. Nothing in real life, it's obviously not that vibrant. And it is nice to see in post to just make it all stand out, but I personally really like things to be softer, more natural, and just an enhanced version of what I see. And to go from this to that already, that's enough for me. So I can do a little bit, you know, I can handle the plus 10 and plus 5 on the vibration, on the vibrance and saturation scale here. But too much, I think, would take it to a level that looks kind of fake, and it reduces the quality and the overall impression and value you would be putting on your landscape photo. Because those kind of contrast and color shifts are, when you find them in a natural scene, that's where you really want to see those colors pop. You know, if you're in a brilliantly blue colored ocean or on a coral reef or something where you have really bright tropical colors, perfect place to see that happen, and you can slightly enhance that in real life. But on this foggy mountaintop, you know, I'd say we're already, you know, right exactly where we want to be. So I hope you find this helpful. I hope this helps you with your landscape images from here on out, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on using the Dehaze tool and what you think of pulling out the detail behind the fog, and I hope you found that helpful.